Well, we're getting really close to the end. I hope you all enjoyed your Thanksgiving. What we're going to do is we're going to talk about kind of a variety of items that we may have missed throughout the course of the lecture or series. And also next week, so this week will be this lecture you're seeing put up. Then the following week, pardon me, will be the review for the final, and then we're getting close to the final. So um, all the turn-in type things, all the assignment blocks on the Blackboard are posted up there. So um, you can start working on that and getting things completed and moving on. So we've talked about a lot of things here, and like I said, I think I mentioned I spent the majority of my early career in the military, and it's kind of like working for a big corporation in terms of, as opposed to being self-employed, or even the ability to really have a side hustle is pretty difficult in a lot of military situations when you're moving around. But subsequent to that, as a military contractor, I had more stability, and now just being fully self-employed, it's pretty fulfilling, and it's something that financially I think it will work for you all as well if you ever are able to get in that position. And it gives you tremendous flexibility in terms of personal finance. So I'm going to talk about that. Things have changed a lot, over the past whatever. This isn't your parents' economy or whatever trite cliche is out there, but a lot of people do tend to do something perhaps on the side, or want to explore that, or the truth is, when you're working for somebody else, they are only going to pay you as much as they need to. You're always going to be worth more to them, um, generating more income for them than they're actually paying you. That's just the way it works. Otherwise, they wouldn't hire you. And so, if you're an employer, it's a great thing, because, it's kind of a multiplier to have somebody out there working for you. But by that same token, if you're ever in a position where you can be working for yourself, your opportunity to thrive and perhaps you know have more satisfaction and a sense of accomplishment. I tell you what, in the corporate world, I found that soul crushing. I found that you just jump through the hoops, and too many of my good friends have got their heads just stuck in the trough, and just the money's decent, good, whatever, and they just can't go back, and they're just getting older, and it's just so. Again, I'm not trying to get philosophical with y'all, but life is short, and at a certain point, you got to be. I don't know. I think that the kids, or whatever you want to call it, generations are, have a probably a better perception of the work-life balance that a lot of the boomers don't quite understand, who just work themselves into nothing, and don't have a whole lot to show for it at the end of their life. So anyway, wow, we are way off on a tangent now, but we're going to pull this thing back, and we're going to talk about investments. So there are some investments out there, and proportionately in terms of marketing, whether it be a podcast, whether it be bad TV, whatever, you are going to be bombarded by the precious metals people, and then collectibles. You're always going to have friends that are going to be getting this, getting that. When I was overseas, people were picking up rugs, and even when I was in Afghanistan, not too awful long ago, all sorts of gems, because they do have a lot of gems there. Unfortunately, they have a lot of glass as well that looks like a gem, and it's easier to get than have to work for it. Speculative stocks, you know, I'm telling you, don't do this, but I've done this my entire life. Just small ones though, and some I've had some winners, but I don't confuse myself that uh, investing in speculative stock. No, you're not investing. You're basically gambling. And if you're going to go blow whatever amount on, at the track, or on a sports booking thing, that's if you got that same money and applied it to stocks, you'd probably be money ahead. So if it's that kind of money, go ahead and do it. But if you're getting your retirement money and you're buying penny stocks, that's not a sound strategy. Cryptocurrencies, this is massive, and it's the power of this. You know, it's very hard to get your head around the whole concept and everything, and the way the systems work. But first off, you need to realize that not all cryptos are the same. There's Bitcoin and Ethereum. Some of these, and even some of the Bitcoin people are these Bitcoin maximalists or whatever they call themselves that shun everything other than Bitcoin. But there's a couple decent coins in there, and then there's other garbage in there. There's Dogecoin and all this other stuff. So they're not all the same. First off, but the power that the crypto and the blockchain and all that stuff has in terms of kind of breaking open finance and liberating it from some of the big institutions that have had control over it forever is amazing. But there's a lot of enemies out there, a lot of knives coming for it, so we'll see what happens. And then real estate, the ultimate investment in my mind. It's something that you can enjoy, something that's stable, and you can generate money from it, but I've always used it as more of a holding place. But anyway, and then inflation. Inflation is working counter to all of your investments. And I used to talk about it that it could happen. Well, believe me, it's definitely happening. So we'll look at why that's happened. Okay, so these gold people, they call them gold bugs, whatever. And oh my gosh, they're convinced that it's going to explode. I work with a guy, and it's going to be at 10,000, and he's a miner, so he does that, and good on him and stuff. But there's a lot of people who've got a lot of gold squirreled away, and they've had it squirreled away forever, knowing that it's going to go to whatever point. If the economy gets shaky, if inflation goes up, if there's some sort of crisis in the world, the price of gold's going to skyrocket. Well, guess what? We've got all of that now, and we can say, literally based upon experience, it still ain't happening. Gold is still floundering, and it's a tough thing. Gold and silver, a lot of these precious metals, you have to keep in mind that not only are they investment, but they're also an industrial commodity. So if we go into a recession, gold is I'm not a physicist or electronical engineer, but the conductive properties of gold, the anti-corrosion properties of gold. There's a lot of properties that make it a great industrial metal and unique. And so when industrial demand goes down in times of recession, and the same is true with silver and platinum and all these other metals, when demand goes down on the industrial side, the forces that would cause it to inflate are reduced by the fact that there's less demand in the industrial side. And then there's also a lot of funny stuff going on in terms of price manipulation, perhaps. Whatever, we could go there, but again, that makes the argument for Bitcoin. So all these folks, retired folks who put their money in the IRAs and they put it in some sort of gold-denominated investment, I'd be a little disappointed. This is back in 2003, but look in modern times, this is just kind of all over the place. I mean, there's worse investments, don't get me wrong, but in terms of the next big thing, I'm just underwhelmed. And Bitcoin, to tell you the truth, not that Bitcoin's going consistently up, but a lot of that money that would be buying gold in the younger generation is driven more into crypto, perhaps, and so maybe it took the spot as a store of wealth, whatever they want to call it. So, could be a part of your portfolio, but again, where are you going to keep it? So the storage, the security aspects of it, I guess you can keep it on account, but now you're, if you're a doomsday type person, and then, some of these other things, especially you hear this in kind of Alaska, and I don't know, people say, well, if whatever hits the fan, if you have gold, well, guess what? You better have some guns as well, because if you have gold and there is utter, if it's this apocalyptic, chaos, anarchy time, somebody's just going to take your gold. So I don't see the utility of going to a gas station and trying to purchase something with gold. Why is inflation happening? See, this is the money supply, the M2, the money supply. You can see that, here, whoops, all of a sudden, this was COVID, all this other stuff. But when you pump that kind of money into the market, there's going to be a reaction. So, is inflation going away anytime soon? Well, it may be countered by a recession. So we'll see what happens. Although just recently, gas prices are coming down. It's kind of like getting hit in the head with a hammer. It feels really good when you stop, but gas at $4 a gallon is not necessarily a bargain. So, whoops. Let's see if we went too far. Okay, so collectibles, and this sort of has the same thing that I was talking about with gold, the storage and security aspect. But the other part about collectibles, it's trying to figure out this. The skill part is trying to figure out what is going to be collectible. There's going to be certain standouts, and I know there's probably some of you out there who have made money collecting some item, whether it be antique guns or I don't know, some sort of consumer thing. I want to say Beanie Babies, but I don't want to go there. But some of these things that people thought that were going to be very, have some value to them, maybe not. The counterfeit issue, I put this in there just because of being in Afghanistan, and I think there were rubies and even diamonds and all this other stuff. So much of the stuff. In fact, I ended up, strange story, but got engaged way back when I was actually in Saudi Arabia. We happened to be there at the time, and I'm pretty sure that ring I bought her was nothing but glass. I mean, and there was no expertise, and the deal was that I was getting a great deal on that ring because I was overseas, which also meant that this was actually in Riyadh or Dhahran or whatever, and there was nobody to actually verify it or verify it who you could trust. So you have to be careful with a lot of the collectible stuff. This is really how I got into buying stocks and stuff at an early age. We were buying all kinds of, all my friends were spending major, 20 grand or so per rug on some of these Persian rugs and some of these, just beautiful silk handmade rugs and other things like that, and telling me how great they were in terms of investments. And I just didn't see it. Number one, because I got dogs who would turn that silk rug into a dog toy in seconds. But also, just how are you going to trade this thing? I've got a good friend over, and he was in Turkey, and he's since passed away. But Mehmet, he actually went by Charlie, but he was a Turk, born and raised, knew all kinds of things. But one of the things was he sold rugs and antique carpets and new carpets and all that stuff. And so I took three of his fairly high dollar, not super expensive rugs, but the price he was paying from the Iranians or Persians or whoever he was buying them from was about $300 a piece, and he was selling them for about 12 or 1400 at a store. And so I took them all back to the East Coast, some dive in New Jersey, and went in there, and sure enough, they were selling for about the 12 to 1400 or even $2,000 at this shop. And I had three of them with me, and I said, hey, I can sell these to you, and they were going to give me about $300 a piece because that's all they paid for them too. And they had a showcase, a big shop with tons of rugs, and they do all kinds of service. And there was a reason why they were able to charge what they did for the rugs. And me just walking in there with rugs or trying to sell them on eBay or whatever, it may be a very expensive rug, but who are you going to sell it to? And you're probably not going to get the price you want. So that whole liquidity thing, if you've got, turning that rug, that carpet into cash, could be So again, you got to know what it is. I know in the classic car market, the prices fluctuate wildly, and so supply demand, having to wait for an auction, having to find the buyer at the auction. There's a lot to it that you would not have with most types of investments. And then the ability for the thing to get damaged, destroyed, stolen, even paying for the security or paying for the storage. A lot more to it. So nice to have, but is it in the investment class? Maybe a portion of your investments, but certainly not. And I hate to keep herding you back to the stock market or real estate. Actually, I don't mind herding you back to real estate, but a lot of people are apprehensive about the stock market, but I hate to say it, that's kind of the beast we're dealt with. Speculative stocks. So a lot of these stocks have, the Wolf of Wall Street, the whole pump and dump model, and especially now that you've got this sort of hyper information environment where people can make it look like there's momentum behind a stock, behind some sort of concept to drive the price up, knowing full well that once it gets to a certain point, they're selling, and they're selling everything they got, and that price is going to plummet right back down. That's the problem with speculative stocks now. You can go on whatever, Wall Street Bets or just message boards or general news, and there is a lot of manipulation from people who have positions already with that stock. So that's how they do it, pump and dump. Their SEC, if even talking about Dogecoin and stuff, part of the reason Dogecoin blew up a little bit had to do with Elon Musk. And I've heard stories that he was involved with it just sort of as a cover, because he was doing things with Tesla stock and Bitcoin and other things that made him kind of the focus of the SEC. And the fact that he got involved with Dogecoin, which is just sort of started out as a joke type coin, made it look, give him a bit of cover to claim he was non-serious, and that I can't manipulate the market. I'm actually I'm not that savvy. I'm involved with things like Dogecoin. Well, the problem is Dogecoin actually took off and ended up being sort of an investment, but probably not for the long term. Get rich quick schemes. Yep, nobody has patience. That's the way it works. And then futures and options. We talked about futures and options. This is where you guarantee the price or guarantee to buy a commodity at a future price. And the problem is the scale at which these things can happen, and the magnification that can happen to your gains or losses. I mean, on the upside, obviously unlimited gains can be, but if you have a commitment, you've got a problem. So that's why futures, I've never bought futures. I can't stand the heat of if that thing potentially goes bad. Options, I've bought options on several occasions, and kind of interesting, but you really need to study the market. The difference between a future and an option, a future is the responsibility to follow through with the contract, so to make good. If you promise to deliver, jet fuel at $4 a gallon, it's trading for $6 a gallon, you're screwed. You're going to be out $2 for every gallon you have to deliver. As opposed to, let's say you had that under an options contract, you had the option to deliver at $4, but it's currently trading at $6. So you're just going to let that option expire worthless. You paid a premium to have that option, but you're just going to let that thing go, because if you completed that, you would lose quite a bit of money. So anyway, cryptocurrency. So like I referred to this, is it the new gold, the new store of wealth? It's pretty resilient. People think, oh, Bitcoin price is dropping and this is just horrific. Well, that also shows a bit of confidence. If this were to happen in a regular stock, I think that the swing would be even more violent because people would lose faith. They would think the company's going out of business. They would think they've got to get out. Whereas a lot of people, hodlers or whatever, holding on for dear life, uh, I'm not selling my Bitcoin regardless of what price it goes to on the downside because I'm confident it's going to come back up. So if there's people like me out there, which there's a lot, um, if the price just drops, they're not selling. So the price could drop quite a bit, and I don't think you're necessarily going to see the panic selling. You did have some people who had bought Bitcoin on margin, and we've talked about financing investments on margin generally being a very bad idea. That's using borrowed money to fund your investments. It's a way to leverage to get quite a bit of you know money involved in a particular commodity. So if it goes up, you've got a multiplied amount of money in there, but you can also get in serious trouble with margin calls, which means that these are secured loans. These loans are secured by the underlying commodity, and if that underlying commodity price drops, you get a call from the broker or an email or an alert or what have you, and you got to come up with some more cash to buy more of that underlying commodity to get your margin back where it needs to be. Let's say, in the case of stocks, typically 50%. And so it can get very ugly very quick. Wild fluctuations, yeah, but there is some predictability to it. You got to get in there and kind of study this. But buying the dip, everybody, it's so counterintuitive and counterproductive for any type of investments. When something's going up, you want to buy more, and a lot of times when it's going up, if you try to do that with crypto, you're going to get burned. It went up in the 60,000 range, and if you thought, "Wow, I'm getting rich, I need more of this," you would have bought at the high. It's very painful, but if it drops to 10,000, I'm going to probably buy some more. Range of investment options. So yeah, definitely a lot of different coins out there, but Bitcoin and Ethereum are kind of the two that are going to stay around in my mind. But I've talked about the disruptive assets. There's a lot of people. There'll be a lot of winners on Bitcoin and the crypto, but there'll be a lot of established people that are going to be displaced. And especially when we start talking about decentralized finance, where you have other options for getting a loan or getting some sort of contract or financing through the crypto market, as opposed to some of the big banks that have had control of it, where the crypto market can perhaps the DeFi market can do it quicker at a lower fee. That's going to displace some people. So there's a lot of people who have established businesses that are going to be displaced, and so they're pretty well connected, and they're going to fight to prevent it. Potential to completely change the financial world. Yeah, pardon me. I subsequently have talked to quite a few of my friends on the whole crypto business about this FTX situation, and I mean that was just a corrupt thing from the get-go. But a lot of people are welcoming more regulation. Anyway, just to legitimize it and get all crypto out there, but don't judge crypto by FTX. Ponzi schemes are Ponzi schemes. They could do the same with any commodity. Crypto was just a chosen commodity. This guy chose, him and his friends, he wasn't alone obviously, to execute the Ponzi scheme on. But it's not. Crypto was as much of a victim as his customers were. And then real estate. Tangible. Sorry. I don't know. I don't typically cough this much in real life. It's just when I turn on the video. something that you can actually reach out and touch, so that the opposite of the counterfeit. This is something you can actually verify, and there's title companies and other people out there who can and verify that you have, ownership of it. It's not going to scream up in price. It depends on the market. Phoenix, Las Vegas, Miami Beach, places like that. Yeah, they can have these wild fluctuations, but most environments, real estate is a fairly stable environment, and protected by most politicians. It's not something that's at risk. I wouldn't say there's a lot of people gunning to diminish the value of real estate like in crypto or other things. Lack of liquidity. Transactions take forever. You still need a buyer too. You need to find a buyer who's interested in the piece of property you have, and then just the mechanics of getting it done take forever. So, inherent hedge, literally, people do need a place to live. What happened in 2007, 2008? People thought, mortgage they're absolutely safe because people need a place to live. The problem with that scenario was people were financing their third, fourth, fifth house that they had no intention of ever living in. So they were more just like regular investments. Nobody was going to be out in the cold, investor-wise, because they failed to pay their mortgage. These were purely investments, and so they weren't individual homeowners who would have provided that stability. So there is a hedge against inflation that's going to go up with the market. In fact, it could be said right now, if you have a large loan in real estate, that inflation is a great thing. It's kind of short-sighted to think that way, but the amount of money you have borrowed is being decreased all of the time. And if you've got rental properties, the amount of rent you're going to be able to charge compared to the mortgage that you're having to pay is pretty amazing. So, and then the potential to enhance your life. I'm waiting for the sun to come up right now, and it's amazing view and just nice places to live. It can change your life. Okay, so I talked a little bit about the potential for a lot of you to, at some point in your life, to be in business for yourself, if not as your primary source of income, as a side thing. And there's different ways to do it in terms of the business structure that will have a great effect on your success and also your ability to keep the wealth. If you're in a sole proprietorship, in terms of liability, you are completely at risk. So let's say you're going to be, just for simplicity, a painter, like a house painter. So if you just, buy a truck, slap your name on the side, and just go out and start painting and don't do any business type stuff, maybe just get a business license, you're going to end up as a sole proprietorship because it's the easiest thing to do. But the problem is, let's say you're, going down the highway and a ladder falls off your truck and you cause this horrific accident. You are going to get sued, and you are probably going to lose, most if not everything. Not only the business, but also your personal property, your home, everything else. It's all at risk because you're just a sole proprietorship. As opposed to, let's compare it to some form of corporation, whether that be a true corporation, which is probably a bridge too far, but an LLC or something like that. And an LLC, your limit of liability would be within that company. So they could take the assets related to the business, the truck, or certainly the ladder, and maybe cripple that painting business. But truth is, you could start up a different business under a different name a couple years later, and you're not going to be that injured, but financially, because you took the time to set up a different, formed a different type of business. Partnerships are not much different than than a sole proprietorship. Sometimes you see them in the legal field and other fields, but they don't have that many advantages when it comes to liability. And the problem is that there's also more than just one person involved. So obviously their potential for conflict can be in there. The taxation, you'd be taxed as an individual, just as in the sole proprietorship. So I didn't talk really about that, but the ability to move money around and transfer the business and do other things, again, very, very limited. Again, it's easy. So that's why are there so many sole proprietorships? Because it's easy to form. You really don't do much at all to form it. And a partnership, kind of the same way, easy way for somebody to do it. A corporation. Now, this is a true corporation, and you could form a regular corporation, but there's advantages to forming some of the little subsets. But anyway, in a normal corporation, typically a C-type corporation, you would have the concept of the shareholders. And so now you have people, this could be almost any form. It could be a huge number of investors or one. The corporation itself is taxed, and then if it pays out profits, those profits again, if it's a corporational one, you'd be taxed again. So that'd be the double taxation problem. But the limited liability, the reason most people are going to a corporation in terms of capital generation is also the limited liability that I spoke of. So the assets with the corporation are identified as such, and so if there is a problem, that corporation gets sued, and that's what's at risk, not your personal items. So it's a legal entity, and people get upset with this, that the fact that if in a court, it has basically personhood, but there's also some advantages to this as well in terms of transfer, since it's its own entity. If you happen to die, pass away, you're not in as big of issue when it's a corporation. When you own the corporation, that the corporation didn't die. In a sole proprietorship, again, you've got this painting business. It's pretty successful. You've got some kids who are probably going to take it over, maybe, or you're going to sell it to, your kids would sell it to somebody, your heirs, or whoever would sell it to somebody. Well, the sole proprietorship went away when you did, so they can't sell it very easily. They could maybe claim, inheritance of those assets and put it together, and it's going to be much more difficult. If they had it formed as a corporation, boom, they can just sell it as a corporation and done. S Corp, I'm actually an S Corp, up to 100, or just 1, 2, taxed as a partnership, so it passes through, and I don't have that double taxation problem. I'm after it for the liability portion, but also the taxation. But there's certain requirements I have to do for the IRS to keep my S Corp status, but not a big deal. Another popular business formation is the LLC. So just different, but again, this is strictly, or not strictly, but that same advantage with the lawsuits. A lot of times people are doing it to limit their liability, and this can happen. I mean, I was involved in a real estate. This was transaction down in Florida, super speculative, out in the Pensacola area, and it seemed like a good deal, and I was getting involved in it, and it wasn't a huge amount of money. I think my stake was about $10,000, but it just didn't look right. So it's called the Blue Parrot #1. Sounded like a weird bar or something. So anyway, I ended up pulling out. Thank God I did, because the company went out of business, but very much out of business. They went in the hole. They ended up with all kinds of liabilities. So by investing that 10 grand, I could have been on the hook for much more than the 10 grand. I could have lost um, whatever. I had a friend who stated I think he ended up having to pay out about 30 grand. So you have to be very careful when you're making investments, and when you don't have some sort of liability protection. And in that case, it would have been more of a partnership thing where you would have been um, um, an indirect partner. But anyway, getting beyond the scope of this, but be careful. Be careful about, it's not only about trying to gain some wealth, but it's also about keeping that wealth. So, just a quick review: sole proprietorships. Yeah, typically small. 3/4 of the U.S. companies. So 3/4 of these companies are basically poorly formed. Things are at risk. Why? Because it's easy, and that's why people, get it. Less likely to get credit. I think all business owners, because it just kind of displays kind of a lack of seriousness in business formation, and also it the fact that the owner may die and the business goes away. People don't like to lend money to businesses that are potentially at risk. Here are the numbers. Now, if you looked at the number of assets controlled, the corporations would be huge. This is just absolute numbers. Advantages, easy to put together. Yeah, keep it all to yourself. Owner keeps all the profits. Can happen. Not a lot of government regulation. No double taxation. No corporate taxation. Can be dissolved easily, perhaps easier than you think. Don't have to pay fees. You have to have a business license, but you don't have to do corporate filings and stuff, which again are not that hard. I'll do mine next month, and it's, I don't know, $125 or $250, and some of them are every 2 years, some of them are just once a year. Unlimited liability, scarce external funding. It's all tied to you. Higher taxation rate. Lack of qualified employees. There's also some of these business entities. If you have employees that are more than just employees, if they have a share in the business, they're much more motivated. You're probably all profit. You see this with the number of businesses around town, and in fact, I know a guy who owns a resort where he's made everybody within the corporation an owner, and upon his death, it all goes to the employees. Because guess what? He can't take it with him anyway. I mean, he's given away something that he can't hold on to anyway. So in the short term, which is kind of the long term, the rest of his life, he enjoys the benefits of having employees that are motivated, that are out for him, and they also like him because he's putting his money where his mouth is. So that's not a sole proprietorship. He's got basically a corporation with the employees owning the business. Partnership. Yep. Again, easy to put together. Some of the disadvantages now that you have a couple people involved. But I think that huge disadvantage is that you've got sort of this co-equal nature of the two partners. You can structure it, but it's going to be a little bit more complex legally. Limited partnership. Like I say, if I would have gotten involved in that real estate thing, knowing what I know now, I would have made sure I was a limited partner. I would have been able to tell them, advise them on the project. I could only have, I couldn't make inputs. I couldn't get involved in management because I would have put myself, my limited partnership could have been challenged. So you'll see sometimes some companies just kind of run very strangely, and you wonder why the investors don't object. Well, it's they may be in a limited partnership situation and can't object without destroying that limited liability aspect. So the articles of partnership, yep. So again, lawyers involved, a little more complexity, a little bit more stable in terms of getting a loan, more people, don't have to answer to a board or anything like that, not too many regulations, so easier. Liability is still traced right back to the owners, unless it's some sort of limited, but somebody within the partnership is going to be on the hook for the liability. The limited partners, not so much. Yep, trying to sell is going to be a little more difficult. And you don't have that means of selling shares, and it's not a legal entity. It's an entity on its own like a corporation is. Yeah, I'm not going to go too much in the tax part, but it's not as advantageous as some of the business models. So the rights of the person, the corporation signs contracts, it owns property, sued and can be sued. So again, if you look at that pie graph, the amount of money controlled by corporations is huge. Even though their numbers are smaller, the amount of assets controlled is quite a bit bigger. Have the ability to do stocks and dividends, so they can generate wealth, pay dividends. It's dead easy. Especially depends on the state. You'll see a lot of corporations, based out of Delaware or sometimes other states that have very favorable corporate laws. Delaware is just a pushover. They side with the company, so that's where you'll see a lot of your big credit card companies, and just a lot of companies in general. A lot of big corporations are Delaware corporations. Not necessarily a good thing for the consumer. But if you want to form a corporation in Alaska, get on the website, make sure there's no conflict with the name, fill out a couple forms. You could literally do it definitely without a lawyer and under 20 minutes or so. So it's not as difficult. The corporate where you have to do your annual report again. Take a few blocks. Can get a little bit more complex with taxes, but complexity is good. The tax code benefits those who take a little bit more time in their taxes. I'm not going to go there. That's well beyond the scope. But yeah, you can see a company and you go, wow, that's a great company. I want to invest. And then you find out, no, they're not listed. They're a private corporation, not sold to the public. And so then they don't have to disclose a bunch of things. If you are going to be a public corporation, you are under all sorts of different restrictions. And in fact, there's a thing like with Apple stock, for example, the price will vary because there's so many regulations in terms of what can be said, when it can be sold. The people who are on these boards or in the leadership positions of corporations, they can go to jail if they make false claims as to, and again, Elon Musk sometimes gets in trouble with this. If they can, be shown to be manipulating the stock or making disclosures close to when earnings are announced or when reports are filed, they can get in trouble. And many times they're prohibited from doing it by law. So you'll see some stock manipulation happen by their competitors because they can say something like, oh, the new iPhone is horrible, it won't work, won't do this, and the folks at Apple can't come out and say, oh, that's all BS, because they're within the window of their SEC disclosures. And anyway, it's a good game because let's say Samsung or whoever, just people who want to see the stock price move, they can release some bad information that's not countered. The stock price dips, and This used to happen on kind of an annual basis, timed with the SEC filings. But anyway, if it's a public corporation as opposed to something that's traded in the penny stocks or in the pink sheets or something like that, or a private corporation, um, those people can be liable for any misstatements they make. So we talked about IPOs, just when a company goes from private to public. Setting that initial stock price, though, is the difficult part on an IPO, and so that is pretty speculative. Yep. Nonprofit corporations. I formed one of those as well on the same Alaska website. IRS disapproved it. It was a great idea, but they wouldn't do it. I raised hogs. I had a big company called Capitalist Pigs. What we're going to do is get all the scrap from the food banks, which is readily available, is a problem to them. I'm not talking the regular food that's given away to people at the food banks, but the stuff that's a little bit beyond prime, that's starting to go, that is not savory to people, but hogs would love it. Anyway, feed that to hogs, and same with spent grain. Be able to give, especially the brewers, be able to give them credit, tax deductible credit for their donations of spent grain. So again, they have a waste problem that they're going to have to pay to put in the landfill. That's not going to do anybody any good. Anyway, feed that to hogs, generate, pork in this case, and feed it back into the food bank system. So a great idea, but anyway, the IRS said no, because I owned the land, and they said that was a conflict. So I did feed hogs for about 3 years doing that system, but rather than it going to charity, it went to me. So whatever, at least somebody won. Elements of a corporation. So getting down in the weeds on this a little bit, but again, board of directors, if you look at my corporate filings, me and one of my daughters. Not a big deal. I had to inform my daughter that she was even on it. Preferred stock, we're not going to go there. We've already talked about that a little bit. It's kind of overrated. It just has to do with dividends and common stock. Most stock out there is just common stock, and it's just as good. It's kind of a pejorative term. The preferred versus common. Don't sweat it. Although that being said, I'm not one to hold income stock or dividend stocks. So again, in the corporations, the limited liability, ease of transfer, perpetual life, expansion potential, a lot of positive. You've got an entity now, an entity that's enduring. So people are more likely to invest in it. The double taxation. So the corporate profits being taxed and then paying out to the owners and getting taxed again as personal income. Expensive to form. If you get down in the weeds, a big corporation, but again, economies of scale, you'll spread that out. But in terms of actually starting one, it's the same fee on the same website as the others. Now, if you're going to go public with it, yeah, there's going to be a lot more to it. But again, it's, some of these corporations, these employee-owned corporations, if you can get your employees motivated and give them more reason to work, just the opposite of what I was talking about, that soul-crushing corporate experience I had, I think it would have been different in a different type of corporation. Other types, joint ventures, yep. These usually are temporary type things where they come together for the benefit of each and can do it. The S-Corp, sort of a hybrid to get the benefits of both. The profits from the corporation flow straight through, as personal income, so they're taxed only once, and then that limited liability retains. Very popular. So this is all based upon current law. If they change the rules regarding S corps, it's like anything else. Nothing's static. May have to reform if the rules change, but right now S corps are pretty advantageous. LLCs. To get into what's best between an S corp and an LLC, I was an LLC and now I'm an S corp, but it not a big deal. You don't form an S corp on the state side. It's more of a tax thing. My accountant set that up. Cooperatives. You see these a lot of times on agricultural type situations where a corporation is not appropriate. And yeah, not necessarily nonprofit, but more in that realm. And like I say, pretty popular in sometimes housing cooperatives, but mainly in agriculture. All right, I want to talk just a little bit about real estate because this is one of the biggest financial transactions you'll probably encounter, and the potential for the greatest wealth generation long term in terms of stability. We've talked a little bit about real estate, but you need to look at this as also an investment. Most people build rental property, at least for individual investors, through their individual purchase of a home. You have many advantages. If you go to buy a home today, well, it's going to be painful in any case. But anyway, the interest rate you'll be charged as an owner-occupier, as a person who's actually buying the house to live in, is in the neighborhood of 1/2 of what it is for somebody who's buying it strictly as an investment. So if you have a rental empire, 20, 30 years down the road, and it's made out of properties that you purchased, maybe lived in a few years, and then moved on, and you just sort of stagger along, moving, every maybe 5 years or so, and building up your rental inventory that way, the price that you're going to be paying for those mortgages is going to be substantially less than somebody who just goes out and buys a rental property. So, and this could actually, you could get into this from day one. Let's say you're buying a duplex and you buy it as an owner-occupier, even though the other half is going to be a rental. That's a great way to get in for a good interest rate and get in the rental market right off. And I actually, having that property, your rental property, adjoining your unit is a good way to manage that rental property as well. So lots of options there. But anyway, so what I'm saying in the search for a home is not only are you searching for something that fits your needs, but is also very valuable in the rental market. So you don't want anything too unique, or you don't want to say, oh, this home's selling for a lower price because the schools in the local area are crap and people don't like them. But you don't have kids, so that's not a problem to you. Well, yeah, it is a problem to you, because if this is going to be a future rental, it's going to be impacted by those crap schools. So you need to be kind of concerned. You need to be buying something that's you're almost buying it to sell it. You're buying it to see how it looks from other people's eyes. So location is huge. Location is always huge. Licensee, the real estate agent, probably going to use one of those because you're not paying the commission, right? If you're buying the home, you don't pay the commission. So it doesn't restrict you from buying from some individual. As long as that agent didn't refer you, that'd be kind of a foul. But you can go out and look at all the different properties you want. But if you have a licensee helping you in the process, they'll probably get the deal done. There'll probably be less problems in the transaction, and you probably won't overpay and a few other things. So not a lot of downside to using a licensee in the buying process. Zillow and online services, those they're going to come of age. They'll be useful at some point, but right now, especially because Alaska's a non-disclosure state, it makes their ability to gain accurate data quite difficult, and also there's a lot of hesitancy. These real estate agents, there's a lot of people who have a career built upon this, and so they tend to try to fight this system as much as they can. I think it's a losing battle at a certain point. There will be lower commissions, fewer people involved in real estate, and but anyway, um, you may have your own opinion, but to use some of these online services right now, they're just not mature enough in terms of accuracy, and they don't have enough data, or they'll have you'll look at some data going, oh wow, I can get that house for whatever price, and no, probably not, or property that's has some sort of unique thing like an avalanche zone, like never getting sun any time of the year, or something like that wouldn't show up on an online service. So especially in Alaska, it can be a problem. Disclosure. The other reason for using an agent is that the disclosure. If agents are very fearful of being sued because they're going to lose. If you go to court and it's you, the buyer, versus an agent, the propensity is that the agent should have known better. The court is going to generally side with the consumer. So these guys are very, very risk averse and very much want to make sure that the disclosures are complied with. Whereas if it's a for sale by owner, you're both looked at as consumers, and the fact that the guy knew the roof leak but didn't tell you, it may not be as, you may not have the certainty to win in court like you would if there's an agent involved. So anyway, you want full disclosure by the seller. You want to know all the defects that are anything that's going on with that property. So that's important. Homeowners associations too, they sort of fall in that. You need to know what you're getting into. The agents now may not know all the details, but sometimes on this, certain homeowners associations just have a reputation that you might find on some sort of online review type source where people would either complain or praise the corporate or association. But that can definitely impact your living experiences if you get a very onerous homeowner association or a reputation for a homeowners association that's just over the top. Appraisal. So as a buyer, you get a sense of validation when you're buying a home and you aren't sure what to offer, and you know what it's being listed for, and you say you offer 300, and the home goes out and gets appraised for right at 300, and then you feel validated that, wow, I made the right. Now it's the appraisers, they do some independent thought, but a lot of it is based upon, number one, they know what your offer is. They know that in order for the deal to be done, that the appraisal needs to come in at about what was offered. So the game is a bit rigged here. They will go out and do comps, comparable sales. They'll look for other properties in the area that have sold, and if it's a tract type home, if it's in a subdivision where all the homes are kind of cookie cutter, it's quite easy to come up with an appraisal. But if it's a property with some land or something else, it's really difficult to do an appraisal. And especially if you want something you don't want anything too unique, but if you want a piece of property that's on the edge of some nice open land that won't be developed, preferably government land or a river or some sort of boundary, that's always a bonus. And but that makes it tougher to appraise because it makes that property a bit more unique, a bit more desirable, hopefully. Inspections, all sorts of different inspectors out there. This is normally a requirement, and as a having been involved in the sales end of this, you kind of size up the buyer and you decide which inspector to call. Some of these guys are just, they'll go after a home and they'll pick it apart and they'll make it sound like it's the worst home ever and scare the buyer. Or there's other ones that just aren't, they just do more of a superficial check, and some of it has to do with the personality of the inspector, and some of it has to do with actually the skill of the inspector. For me, and for you especially, in Alaska, with our not so recent history, but whatever, earthquakes that did reveal a lot of damage happening in homes. I would not buy a home up here without inspection from an engineer. So I got into this when I bought a home a while ago. It was a sort of a distressed property. It was basically fallen into Mirror Lake. The foundation was unstable, but it was a screaming deal, and it was worth the money to me to spend. I guess it was about $500 to have the inspector go out and look at it and verify that it wasn't a good deal. And yeah, he said, yeah, this, even though you could get it for a great price, this poor house is sinking into the lake, and the septic system is non-functional because the water has risen so high. And anyway, a regular home inspector perhaps would have gone out and go, oh yeah, the plugs are good and everything's grounded and this and that, because the engineering aspects were beyond the scope of his expertise. So anyway, this has been several years, but if I was to do another home inspection, I would have somebody who's not only a home inspector but also a professional engineer who could look at the structure itself and make sure that there's no damage that might not, structural damage to the structure caused by perhaps an earthquake that might be overlooked by another. So, but yeah, that's as an agent, you may not want to hire. And again, this gets into be a trust thing with the agent that you've contracted with. They aren't hiding. They're not disclosing a problem, but they may not want to get that engineer who's really going to give it a really hard look and find those problems. We talked about loans a little bit. This should be sort of a non-event by the time you're looking for property. The first thing you should have done is get a pre-approval letter. If you didn't get a pre-approval letter, you probably aren't working with a good agent. A good agent would not take somebody out to show them houses or even really talk with them if they haven't been pre-qualified. So, you go to the lender, you typically pay $50 or whatever to get your credit check done. You fill out all the paperwork, and they tell you what type of loan you can qualify for. And then once you've got that letter, now you know what type of property you can look for, and you can go and seriously look for homes and potential sellers. You're going to be able to get the better price because they know you're a bit more serious, than the propensity for the deal to go through is quite high because you've already been pre-approved. So get that done. Typically with the local lender, there's only a few, so it sounds like I'm pushing for them, but having people that are in the same time zone who know the paperwork, know the local requirements, know how to get it done, it's a huge advantage. Final walkthrough. Yep, at a certain point you've bought the property, the inspections have been done, the loan's getting done, and then you have to go through and kind of give the home a final walkthrough. One home I was buying, there was some damage that was being fixed, and the way they were fixing it was just completely garbage. They were putting in some composite, some whatever floor where it used to have real wood flooring, and so they were, basically using substandard materials. And so I was glad I went through that walkthrough and was able to get that corrected and fixed. Otherwise, if the sale would have closed, I would have been stuck. I still had leverage since the deal wasn't done, and we were able to get it corrected. The closing is again, you by law, all the paperwork for the closing should be provided to you a few days prior. Because what's going to happen at the closing is you're going to walk in and you're going to be bombarded with reams and reams of papers, and it's just not conceivable or realistic that you're going to read and understand and oh, I like what you've done here, oh, thanks for that. It's going to be perhaps a bit over your head, and you're not really going to have time to object and other things, because if you do at this point, you're going to torpedo the whole deal. So get that paperwork beforehand, review it if necessary, have it set up with a lawyer or somebody experienced in the business beforehand, even at a minimum, your own agent to go through you. There are a bunch of loan disclosure documents that, because people have accused the banks of being predatory, and sometimes they are, don't get me wrong, but because of that, some of the loan documents are written in a way to really emphasize the amount of interest you're going to pay over the course of the loan, which can be fairly scary numbers, but when you think about it, it's not as bad. When you actually look at the paperwork and digest it, it's not as drastic. But if you were presented with all that at the closing, it would probably be pretty shocking and make you pretty uncomfortable. So don't do that. Get the documents beforehand, show up at the closing, and just sit there and sign the documents and be out of there in 20 minutes, because you've already reviewed all the docs. And that's about it. The term project, we've talked more about that. I haven't seen too many this week. We had a few last week came in, but it's easy for me to review them and get them back to you. So I encourage you to do that, or whatever. If you hit the page limit, if you've put enough time into it, that's evident by the quality of the work. The format and stuff like that is not so important. Don't worry about that. Whatever's best for you. Don't use some 15-point, 16-point font or something to try and stretch it out, or do triple spacing or something goofy. But if you put the time into it and put a decent plan that's tailored to your needs, you'll get a good grade. And then the final exam prep. So next week, I'll be putting out the review. This is incorrect now, not using the RPNow system. We're going to be doing it through Blackboard, and so the proctoring, I'll fix that up. In fact, I'll take that slide down right now. We're going to change that up a bit and do it through Blackboard means. So the final it's going to be comprehensive, but there's going to be a pretty thorough review. So don't sweat it. But definitely watch the review video once or twice, and you'll be fine. It will be time, so you'll have to spend some time on that. Sounds good.